Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this study that was conducted by Evans and Wener in the year 2007. Now, in this particular study, which is an example study, we'd be discussing how sample tests or salivary cortisol samples could be used to be able to measure the level of stress and individual experiences. Now, while discussing the study, we'd specifically be focusing on the extent to which commuting from one place to another affects an individual's experience, but at the same time, this might cause stress to many people too. So taking this ahead, we talk about the study that was conducted by Evans and Wener in the year 2007. Having a look at the aim of the aim of the study reads: Evans and Wener in the year 2007 conducted research looking at how easily and how frequently personal space may be intruded upon, and how this may be one of the key underlying processes that underlie stressful experiences when traveling. So, the extent to which your personal space being intruded can result in you having a stressful experience when traveling. If we talk about the sample for this particular research, the sample comprised of 139 participants. 54% of them were males. They were all adult commuters who took part in the study during the commute from New Jersey to Manhattan. Each participant was provided a free monthly rail pass. So there was an incentive here for the participation. Participants had been on the same commuting route for on an average of 82 months with a 12-month minimum, and their average duration of the commute to work was 83 minutes. Do we need to learn all of this? No, you do not. You just need to read it a couple of times so that you have a basic idea. Now, taking this further, if we have a look at the procedure of this particular study, two measures of crowding and one salivary cortisol were taken for each participant's journey. So we're talking about two measures of crowding, and along with that, one salivary cortisol measure. This was obtained. Now, along with this, there were two more self-report measures that we talk about on the next slide. But for now, just keep in mind two measures of crowding and one salivary cortisol measure was obtained. So if we speak about these two measures of crowding to begin with, number one, let's talk about the carriage density, and number two, we talk about seating density. Number one, we talk about carriage density. Carriage density was also referred to as distal level measure, and seating density was also referred to as proximal level measure. Now, what is carriage density, and how is this carriage density different from the seating density? When I talk about carriage density, we're talking about the entire carriage, and in that entire carriage, the total amount of seats being there and the amount of seats that were occupied. So we're talking about the a complete carriage, and in that complete carriage, how many seats were there and the amount of seats that were occupied. Now, at times you enter, let's just say if you're entering an aircraft, you see the entire aircraft is full of people. That's what we're talking about. So car or carriage density was calculated by dividing the total number of passengers within the train car by the total number of seats. So we dividing the total number of passengers with the total number of seats, and this we refer to as distal level measure. On the other hand, as we speak about seating density, this was a more proximal measure of crowding local to where the participant was sitting. Local to where the participant was sitting. Now, let's just say the entire carriage was full, but the row where you have your seat, it was let's just say you were the only person sitting in that particular row, so little would matter. It wouldn't really make much of a difference for you if that entire carriage or that entire aircraft is occupied or is full, when you know that the row where you have your seat is not crowded. So when we speak about seating density, this was a more proximal measure of crowding local to where the participant was sitting, and was calculated by dividing the number of people sitting on the same row as them by the total number of the seats that were available in that row. So the amount of seats in a particular row and the amount of occupant seats in that particular row. Occupant seats, by when I use the word occupant seats, I'm referring to the amount of people who are sitting there. So there were two measures of crowding. One, the carriage density, also referred to as distal level measure. Number two, the seating density. This was also referred to as the proximal level measure. Along with this, there was salivary cortisol that was collected from each participant, and this was done through a chewable swab, which is convenient, which is not very, which wouldn't really cause a lot of discomfort, and of course, it is non-invasive. Now, along with this, there were two more measures: the motivation measure and the mood assessment measure that was used by these researchers as well. So, for motivation to be measured, there was a proofreading task which was given to the participants near the end of their commute, a proofreading task. Understand this. If you are to proofread something, you need to be in your best state of mind. If you're not, if you're stressed and if you're cognitively occupied, or if you do not really feel the very best, you wouldn't really be able to proofread it well. In other words, you wouldn't really be able uh, to identify the errors. So a proofreading task was given to participants near the end of the commute. The purpose over here was to measure how persistent and attentive the participant remained after their journey. So how attentive were you? At times, if you've had a stressful experience, a stressful journey, your mind wouldn't really work. So how is this measured? The number of errors detected in the proofreading task were counted. A number of errors detected higher indicated higher motivation and cognitive engagement, whereas a lower number of errors detected reduced motivation and possible cognitive fatigue due to commuting stress. So this is how the motivation was measured. Along with the motivation, we'd speak about the mood as well. During the commute, participants rated their mood using a two 5-point scale. There were two 5-point scales that were used to be able to rate the mood of the participants. And when you're talking about a rating scale being used, of course, that would give you quantitative data. So the scales that were used, either you feel carefree or you feel burdened, right? Now, this measures how light or mentally weighed down the participant felt during the journey. One. Number two, higher burden scores may indicate stress from crowding, discomfort, or other commuting factors. Whereas on the other hand, another measure that was another parameter that was used to measure mood over here was the extent to which a participant feels content or frustrated. So this assesses the emotional state of the participants during the commute, assessing the emotional state of the participants, right? At the beginning, at the top, we had spoken about the motivation level, and now we're talking about the emotional state of the participant. Higher frustration scores were linked to delays, overcrowding, or unpleasant travel conditions. Quickly moving on towards the results of the study before we wrap this. The results showed that the density of the train carriage was inconsequential. So it didn't really matter if the entire train was full. What mattered was the amount of people in the row that you were sitting in. So the results showed that the results showed that the density of the train carriage was inconsequential for levels of stress, whereas the seating density near to the passengers significantly affected both their self-report stress and levels of cortisol in the participant saliva. So this showed in the an increase in the level of cortisol levels, and at the same time the participant reported to have felt more stressed. Evans and Wener conducted that the ease and how frequently personal space is intruded upon may be one of the key processes that underlie the experience of crowding, which causes stress. This study shows that it is possible to measure the impact of stressful experiences, such as a morning commute to work, or an individual by using a physical measure such as taking a sample of saliva and measuring the level of cortisol at different points. So this brings this study to an end. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.